The verdict of obedience of the Sharia court against a disobedient Muslim wife. It is a love story written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright, all rights are reserved. All characters in this book are fictitious, and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. No parts no part of this book may be reproduced, stored in the tribal system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs in a review to be printed in a newspaper, general journal, or school or university magazines. This is a love story about three Muslim girls who were subjected to gross injustice, severe violence, and abhorrent persecution by Muslims, main religious leaders and imams of mosques, Sharia judges of Sharia court, and police officers in the Islamic community and religion of Islam and its hostile, hateful, and abusive teachings against women's rights, which are innumerable. For example, beating of women, child marriage, circumcision of the private parts of Muslim girls, which is known as female genital mutilation or FGM, slaying them in honor killings, inequality between males and females in inheritance, testimony in court, marriage, divorce, men's guardianship over women, controlling their lives and destinies as if they are minors, physically handicapped, or mentally retarded, and forcing them to wear the ibaya, veil, hijab, niqab, or the humiliating black burqa as if they are frightening ghosts. Muslim men are allowed by the Quran to have sex, or rather rape, without the need for marriage captive women of far, such as wives, daughters, sisters, and even mothers of the defeated enemies who are called unclean infidels by the Quran. Islam forbids a Muslim woman to become a president of a country or a caliph of an Islamic caliphate state, or a boss at work, or a judge in court of law, and she is strictly forbidden to lead men or women in prayer as an imama. Moreover, the Prophet Muhammad said the woman is an unclean creature, just like a dog and a donkey, and therefore as a defiled being she annuls or defiles the man's prayer if she passes in front of him while he is praying. Many Islamic countries prevent women from going to school and work, and they are not permitted to drive cars, bicycles, or motorbikes. They are forbidden to practice any kind of sports such as soccer, basketball, volleyball, and tennis, and they are not allowed to go to gymnastics for physical exercise, beaches or swimming pools, cinemas or theaters, or act as heroines in movies, or actors in the stage in plays, or compete in beauty contests such as Miss World or Miss Universe. They cannot compete in the FIFA Women's World Cup of soccer because Islam doesn't allow them to reveal their heads, hairs, faces, hands, shoulders, legs, thighs, and hips, or put short panties like men, because each Muslim woman is aura, or a naked creature. Moreover, none of the Muslim men and girls is allowed to leave the house without her husband or with a muhram man. The woman is forbidden to marry, such as her father or her mother. The Muslim woman is called deficient in intellect and religion, and therefore she considered to be inferior to man. The women are also not allowed to fall in love with men before marriage, or choose their future husbands or life partners. The stories about three abused Muslim teenage girls, namely Intisar, Firdaus, and Muna. Chapter 55. The trial of the Christian bride in the Khartoum Criminal Court. After a long drive, the moving iron cage of the police wagon reached the Khartoum Bahri Criminal Court, where the said innocent girl Intisar will face her first trial. The court room is very crowded with people and is heavily guarded by many policemen and government security personnel known as the Rapid Support Forces. These forces are the notorious Janjaweed militiamen who, along with the Sudanese army soldiers, committed war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, burning cities and villages, and mass rapes of women and underage girls in Darfur region and the Nuba Mountains and south of Sudan. Likewise, they are the ones who are fighting fierce battles today in Khartoum city against the soldiers of the Sudanese army and are committing the same heinous crimes against the 10 million defenseless residents of the triangle capital city of Sudan. The RSF is the illegitimate child of the Sudanese army. The bloodthirsty and rabid soldiers of the Sudanese army is also responsible about the deaths of 2 million people in southern Sudan. Many of the Janjaweed rabid support forces were once military fighters in the same Arab army and committed uncountable numbers of rapes of innocent Christian women and underage girls in South Sudan. Never before had the Christian bride Intisar witnessed such a huge gathering of people. The policeman Sakina Khalafallah Abduddin removed the handcuff from her hands before pushing her out of the wagon. When they got out, they were immediately surrounded by policemen with machine guns. Intisar uh, Inspector Sakina and the other 3 policemen took the suspected girl Intisar into the courtroom. The 7-year-old Christian bride had never seen such angry people in her entire life, as if she was the most dangerous Muslim terrorist who was brought to her final trial. The cops have to use force to beat the crowd and make a way for the 4 guards and the suspected to walk in. Inside the court, the suspected teenage girl was made to sit in a wooden platform cage surrounded by the same 4 elephantic policewomen who have been her guards since the day of her arrest. As soon as Intisar sat down, she realized hundreds of eyes looking at her. None of them looked at her with eye of mercy or sympathy, but all eyes are full of hate, accusation, and condemnation. They are like flames of fire that constantly burn her face. Intisar did not worry about whether the crowd would harm her after the trial or not. She had heard of criminals being murdered by an angry mob inside the courtrooms. She doesn't care about them or fear them. If they were going to beat her, she was beaten hard enough. If some of them want to gang rape her, then her alleged Muslim husband tried to rape her, and she was subjected to 2 brutal rape attempts before. If they kill her, that death will relieve her of the unbearable injustice and suffering she is going through in prison. The 3rd innocent girl Intisar, who was the so-called disobedient, apostate Muslim wife who became a murderous Christian bride to her alleged Muslim husband, did not notice the judge and jury entering the courtroom. All people in court got to their feet but her. 2 police women grabbed her by the shoulders and lifted her up. When His Majesty, the judge, and the honorable jurymen took their seats for judgment and all the audience were seated, the man of the court came forward and began to read the indictment. As a matter of fact, the Khartoum police prepared a long rap sheet against her. Her charges were divided into criminal charges and religious crimes. For this reason, she has to appear before 2 courts, the criminal court and the Sharia court. Honorable judge and respectable jurymen, this is how the court clerk began his reading in a loud and clear voice that everyone heard. Police Department presents before you today the case of the suspect girl Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. She is a Sudanese born woman from the city of Gadarif, arrested by the police at Khartoum International Airport. Police Inspector Al Amin Abdel Qaffar Abdel Sattar. Detained Intisar on charges of traveling outside the country without the correct travel papers. She was traveling under the identity of an Eritrean refugee. When she was asked to show the police permission to leave the refugee camp in eastern Sudan, she said her papers had been stolen. Another interrogation conducted by the police authorities with her later revealed that she had forged the identity of an Eritrean girl and obtained through deception some immigration documents as a foreign refugee who was supposed to be resettled in Canada. She obtained those travel documents from the United Nations office, the Red Cross, and the British Embassy. Police investigations also revealed that she is wanted by the Gadaref City Police. Intisar is a married Muslim woman. Her legitimate Muslim husband named Hassan Mahjoub al-Hilali. She is a Nashis, disobedient Muslim wife, rebellious against her legal Muslim husband and fleeing from the verdict of obedience that issued against her by the judge of the Sharia court in Gadaref City. She ran away with her lover, Sami Osman al-Tayyib. The rebellious wife Intisar and her lover Sami were born in Sudan, and they grew up as Muslims in Gadaref City, but they changed their religion from Christianity to Islam. They did that in order to get married as Christian by a priest of a church and escaped from the country. Intisar deserted Islam and converted to Christianity because she knows that she is a disobedient Muslim wife who is fleeing from the verdict of obedience and the house of obedience of her legal Muslim husband, Hassan. Islamic law does not allow her to marry another man, and she is still a wife under the custody of a Muslim man or a husband who did not divorce her. So, beside her apostasy, she became the wife of two men at the same time. And this is an abhorrent and forbidden act in Islam, and all the laws of other countries reject it and punish for it severely. In other words, no religion or law of any country in the entire world allows a woman to practice polyandry. In addition to all these heinous crimes, Intisar killed her Muslim husband Hassan. She was questioned by the police and she confessed to the murder. After the courtman read the indictment, the prosecutor came forward and began to speak. Honorable Judge Jeremy and all respectable attendees, we all hear about the crimes committed by Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. What do we call a girl who ran away from her Muslim husband and home? What do we call the girl who escaped from the officers of the law enforcement and the verdict of obedience of the Sharia court? What do we call the girl who rejected her religion, Islam, and became an apostate infidel Christian because she wanted to marry her lover? A Muslim wife who married two men at the same time, a girl who deceived diplomats and some foreign delegates, the girl who forged the nationality of another country. Finally, she slaughtered her Muslim husband in cold blood. Do we call her an irresponsible and a nasty woman, or do we call her a transgressor, a traitorous wife, an adulteress, an apostate, a forger woman, a Sudanese traitor to her homeland Sudan, a murderous Muslim wife? For me, as a man of law, I do not call her by any other name than a notorious criminal who deserves severe punishment. Therefore, I ask this esteemed court to issue a death sentence against this disobedient, traitorous, apostate, and murderous Muslim wife. I repeat that I ask the panel of this fair criminal court to issue a death sentence against this accused Sudanese woman, Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. After the plenty after the plaintiff finished speaking and put forward his request that the girl suspect be convicted and executed, the court asked the defense lawyer to move forward and present his arguments if there are any. The recognized Sudanese lawyer Salah Ahmed Hassan Saleh stood up and came forward. When he looked at Intisar, tears streamed down his cheeks and alarm blocked his throat. He tried to open his mouth to speak, but his voice choked. He has to take his handkerchief out of his pocket and wipe away the tears. The suspect Intisar suddenly realized his presence in the courtroom. His sudden appearance revived in her mind some fond memories of the past. She could see Sami, Salah, Farida, Firdos, and herself like innocent children running from restaurant to restaurant, house to house, office to office, court to court, as they were trying to solve their insoluble problem. They did not expect that the problem of 5 young men and women would one day become the problem of 45 million Sudanese. They did not expect that the love affairs between 2 young men and 2 young girls would lead to such bitter hatred and deadly battle. A battle destroyed the family, the home of a poor family of innocent people. A battle that turned an innocent girl as her into the so-called notorious criminal girl. Today, Intisar has seen her lawyer Salah as an angel descending from heaven to defend her. She knows that doing so would cost him dearly in the midst of this hostility and opposition. It is a big challenge for him. Who will pardon him for trying to defend the case of a girl who was socially condemned by everyone? A girl is accused of terrible crimes such as apostasy, adultery, bigamy, forgery, deceit, treason, and murder. She concluded that even God would not be able to absolve her of such heinous crimes. Lawyer Salah said with a voice that struggles to find the right words, "Your Honor, the judge, a respectable juryman, I ask you and all the ladies and gentlemen present in this esteemed courtroom to consider the case of the young teenage suspect Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir with compassionate hearts. I'm not here as her lawyer to deny or try to refute all the charges against her. I'm not here to accuse the law, religion, or society of being the reasons that promoted her to commit these crimes along with her lover Sami Osman Taib. I'm here to support the people who forced them to do what they did. If a person is coerced into committing a crime and the law establishes this coercion, then that person cannot be called a criminal, but rather a victim. This innocent teenage girl's problem began as a social problem. She fell in love with a boy who belongs to a rich family, while she is from a poor family. Being a poor girl, everyone expected there would be opposition from her boyfriend's wealthy father. This is, of course, a very common problem in our society. The problem would have died there had other people not intervened. These people turn a simple social problem into a complex religious problem. I will not go into detail because I recorded confessions of some of these offenders. Then the lawyer Salah presented to the court the recorded tape containing the confession of the witch doctor Haj Muhammad, the 2 confession papers of the criminal half-brother of Intisar, Omar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir, and a copy of the sad, emotional letter sent to him by his late ex-girlfriend Firdos, in which she described in detail how she was tied, beaten, starved, and raped to death by her alleged Muslim husband, the evil old geezer Osman al-Tayyib. He is the father of Sami, the lover of the third innocent girl, the accused Intisar. Then the tape was played and the court man read out the two confession papers and Firdos' love letter. One of you may ask, where are these people now? Attorney Salah is pursuing his defense. As we all know, the end of the bad guys is always either imprisonment or a self-destruction. The half-brother of Intisar, Omar Ibrahim Fajabir, is serving 16 years of life imprisonment in Gadaref Central Prison for his involvement in the kidnapping and rape of an innocent school teenage girl known as Mona Salahuddin Hashim. The charlatan man, the sorcerer, Haj Muhammad, the mastermind of the two sinister plots, is now serving a 24-year life sentence in Gadaref Central Prison for rape, black magic, public deceit, and hypnotizing his visitors and raping their innocent teen girls in front of them. Politician Mahjoub al-Hilali, who is the father of the alleged Muslim husband of Intisar, the late Hassan, is on trial for his involvement in adultery with a married woman known as Raja al-Jamila, who is a wife of a soldier called Abbas. His son Hassan was slain by Intisar in self-defense and honor killing when he tried to rape her while she was imprisoned inside the house of obedience for 3 days and 3 nights. I believe that sooner or later, the Imam of the Grand Mosque in the city of Gadaref, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, and the wealthy business tycoon Osman al-Tayyib will have the same end. These are the guilty people who forced my defendant, the suspect Intisar, to do what she did. These are the people who have been found guilty by Sudanese just law, convicted as criminals, and kept under lock and key. The two innocent lovers, Intisar and Sami, had no choice but to leave Islam, convert to Christianity, change their nationality, marry in the church of as Christians, and obtain immigration documents for Canada by forging and deception, and try to flee the country. They did all these illegal acts without intending to commit crimes, but rather under coercion. Intisar was arrested at Sudan International Airport and Sami managed to flee to Canada. All their efforts to be together as husband and wife failed, and they separated for good. A so-called disobedient Muslim wife who escaped from the verdict of obedience, Intisar was forced to kill her alleged Muslim husband Hassan in the house of obedience when he beat her, abused her, and tried to rape her for 3 days. This happened to her because the Grand Mufti of Diyar al-Muslimin in Sudan believed that her legal Islamic marriage to Hassan was incomplete. To complete such a supposedly halal Islamic marriage, she should have to be raped by what was called her legal Muslim husband for 3 days. Any brave girl in her place would have killed her rapist, and no one should blame her for defending the sanctity of her holy body and her honor. Accordingly, in light of what I have presented to this esteemed court, I ask the honorable judge and the respectable jurymen to pardon the innocent girl Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. She must be given her freedom and allowed to live and grow like any young woman in our society. Moreover, she should be allowed to resume her immigration journey abroad and join her husband Sami Asmal Tayyib as a resettled persecuted refugees in Canada. Again, according to our secular Sudanese criminal law, which is derived from British and Indian laws, any accused person is considered innocent if he commits a crime under duress. After completing his line of defense and pleadings, the recognized Sudanese lawyer Salah realized that he had done his duty as a loyal friend and had done it honestly. He did it without great expectations. He will suffice with any prison sentence, no matter how long it is. His greatest fear is that a dear friend, a minor, and an innocent teenage girl like Intisar will be sentenced to death. He knew and understood that it was very difficult to plead her case in the midst of such opposition and hatred towards her so-called abhorrent religious crimes. He is like a lawyer who is asked to prove that darkness is light and night is day, or that Satan is God, or the moon is the sun, or a 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. He also knows that he stood up for an innocent girl who was abused and exploited and whose life was ruined by her own people. She is like an innocent lamb that has turned it into a dangerous wolf, a good citizen who became a notorious criminal, a law-abiding girl turned it outlaw, a toxic apostate, an infidel Christian, a teenage fraud, a cheat, and a murderous Muslim wife. She would not have committed all these crimes if she had been permitted to marry openly her lover Sami. After lawyer Salah took his seat near his beloved wife, the fairest innocent girl Muna, the judge postponed the final ruling after an hour-long break. The two friends, Intisar and Muna, shed hot tears when they saw each other's eyes. That hour has passed like a century for the married lovers Salah and Muna. They sat silently inside the hall. They can hear people whispering their nasty opinions about the Muslim lawyer Salah's defense of the unjustified, apostate, infidel, adulterous, and murderous girl Intisar. Many faces turned to him with angry gestures. No man looked at him with pity, while the woman expressed their rejection of his attempt to defend the case of the criminal wife who committed adultery with another man and murdered her legal Muslim husband. After an hour's break, the judge, jurymen, and audience took their seats. There is tension and discomfort among the people. There is a long silence. There is a long wait. Finally, the courtman came forward to announce the final verdict issued by the criminal court of Khartoum Bahri against the suspect girl Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. The members of this esteemed court have carefully examined the charges brought against the suspect Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. The defense lawyer Salah helped this court understand the case in its appropriate circumstances and the underlying reasons that led to the filing of charges against his defendant. This court deals with charges of a criminal nature. For this reason, this court does not consider itself concerned with charging the suspected girl who is accused of such religious crimes as apostasy, adultery, and bigamy. These charges will be dealt with in the Islamic Sharia court on the appointed day and time. The charges ruled by this court are deceit, forgery, high treason against the country, and the murder of her Muslim husband Hassan Mahjoub al-Hilali. 1. Is a suspected girl guilty of deception? This court found her guilty of deception. 2. Is the suspected girl guilty of forgery? This court found her guilty of forgery. 3. Is the suspected girl guilty of high treason against her country, Sudan? This court did not find her guilty of high treason against her motherland. 4. Is the Muslim girl Intisar guilty of killing her Muslim husband Hassan? This court found the widowed Muslim wife Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir guilty of killing her late Muslim husband Hassan Mahjoub al-Hilali. In the light of the above aforementioned legal convictions, this criminal court sentenced the suspect Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir to 14 years imprisonment with hard labor. Immediately, the public prosecutor of the criminal court of Khartoum, Bahri, shouted, "The trial is over." Chapter 86: The First Apostate Trial of a Muslim Girl by Birds in Sudan. Many local newspapers, TV channels, and radio stations chose the above address to publish their articles and breaking news about the upcoming religious trial soon for the suspect Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. Before that case, there was a trial of apostasy from Islam that became famous locally and internationally for an apostate Muslim woman of a Sudanese Muslim father and a Cuban Muslim mother. Her father divorced her mother when she was a child, abandoned them, and married another Muslim woman. Although this apostate Muslim woman was raised by her Abyssinian Christian mother, and since childhood she took her to church, the Islamic Sharia court in Khartoum considered her a Muslim by birth and sentenced her to apostasy and hanging until death. Fortunately, some foreign countries and organizations intervened and saved her life. Some secular lawyers and judges in Sudan have also proven that this convicted woman, who is known as Maryam Ishaq, cannot be considered an apostate Muslim because her Cuban mother raised her as a Christian since childhood. When she was released, she traveled directly from Khartoum Airport to Rome International Airport in Italy and met the Pope of the Catholic Church in the Vatican before resuming her journey to the United States of America because she possessed American citizenship. Unfortunately, in the case of Intisar's apostasy from Sudan and her conversion to Christianity, there is no such refuge for her because she is a Muslim, father and grandfather, and her mother, Sarah, is also a Muslim, and she was raised as a Muslim girl until she reached the age of 17, after which she converted to Christianity. Newspaper and TV channels and radio stations started inviting people to trial a week ago. The most exciting news is that it will be the first trial for apostasy of a Muslim girl in Sudan. This news aroused great curiosity and a sense of anger in the hearts of the vast majority of the 10 million people in the triangle-shaped Sudanese capital city. Many people prepared themselves for the historical trial that day. The newspapers reported that the entrance to the courtroom would be on a first come, first served basis. There will be no VIP seats reserved. When the newspaper made this announcement, many dignitaries contacted the Sharia court and raised their objections. According to them, they cannot show up at 4 a.m. and wait for the important trial to start at 10 a.m. The Sharia court accepted their objection on the grounds that such important, distinguished, and cream of society people had many other good things they could do to save the community. Therefore, the religious authority has sought to find a good solution to such a problem. The solution is that the trial will be held in a large auditorium rather than a regular courtroom. The first rows in the big hall will be reserved for political leaders, religious leaders, and wealthy business tycoons. The authority of the Sharia court also agreed to allow there to be 250 people standing on his or her feet inside the hall behind the last seat. There is only a week difference between the date of the criminal trial and the Sharia court trial. On the appointed day, people began to gather in the hall at 2 a.m. in the early hour of the morning. The police authority ordered the crowd to form 8 lines. Hundreds of people lined up in front of each door. The filling of the huge auditorium began at 5 o'clock on Friday morning. By 7:45 a.m., all 8 doors of the huge hall were securely locked. Instead of 250, the police authority allowed 400 standing. Yet most people were excluded. Those who have been excluded were requested to go to their homes and watch the trial on their TVs or hear it in their radios. At 9 a.m., the VIPs started arriving with their new expensive and luxurious cars. None of them were sent back to their palace-like home or left standing outside. About 240 of them came without invitations or a prior reservations. The police authority has become compelled and obliged to make a quick arrangement to accommodate this distinguished person who came without invitation cards because they are characterized by dignity, greatness, and majestic lineages. The police sent for a quick supply of armchairs. When those big chairs were brought in, placed in front of the first row, the community's cream of influence, who had become great through the use of religion, politics, public deceit, corruption, and other exploitation, were comfortably accommodated. Before we turn to the arguments of the civil trial or religious trial of the Sharia court against the suspected girl in Tisar, we must mention a few things. There are many Islamic groups that have come with huge banners. There are more than 100 such banners. On each one, there is written in large letters what the Sharia court must do with the apostate Muslim girl who became an infidel Christian woman for committing such grave and mortal religious crimes. We will ignore many of them and choose only a few. On one of the banners, it says, we, we demand the closure of all churches in Sudan and the banning of the corrupt Christianity, which is the religion of the Nasara, the infidels. Another banner read, we want the Sharia judge to sentence the apostate Muslim girl, adulterous woman, and murderous, disobedient wife to death. On another panel, it says, we want the Sharia court to cut off the head of the apostate Muslim girl who has become an impure, infidel Christian woman. Another panel, which has nothing to do with the case under trial, is written for unknown reason. Death to America and death to Israel. We'll mention one last banner, a taller projecting roof-like one that installed above the courtyard wall of a tall building near the Sharia court building. We did not choose it because it is the tallest and largest marquee or a pavilion, but rather for what it is written in it, and also because it is about Muslim women. In that huge sign that attracts everyone's attention, written in a large, bright, white, light letters, we demand circumcision or a female genital mutilation of private parts of small Muslim girls, the discipline of recalcitrant and disobedient women, the marriage of adolescent girls and minors as soon as possible, and the veiling of the bodies of Muslim girls and women with the hijabs, the niqabs, the abayas, or the burqas. There are many banners that contain some vulgarity and abuse, such as The head of the apostate adulterous girl must be cut off. The filthy Christian infidel prostitute must be killed. The fairest Muslim woman to become an apostate and impure Christian infidel should be stoned to death. The Babylonian prostitute must be hanged. The mother of all abominations, the wife of King Pharaoh's minister Hamad, who seduced our prophet Yusuf the beautiful, and similar things, vulgarity. We did not trouble ourselves with such earthiness and vulgarity. There are two or three billboards that even use the shameful four-letter word like fuck the apostate prostitute girl in Tisar. Want to fuck the uncircumcised pussy of the Coptic Christian girl, Suzanne, who brainwashed in Tisar and converted her to Christianity. And curse those Christian infidels who converted the adulterous Muslim wife to their disgusting and hateful, corrupt religion. At any rate, at 9:30 in the morning, a small door was opened, and the apostate Muslim girl who became a Christian infidel bride was brought in. She was guarded by four huge female policewomen. Her hands and feet are chained as if she is the most dangerous criminal in Sudan. She is wearing short panties and a sleeveless shirt. These two pieces of clothing could not cover her half naked body. Her thighs, hips, and half of her big boobs can be seen. As soon as people saw her in that immodest dress, they started shouting their objections and protests. In fact, the accused Christian bride in Tisar was deliberately forced to wear the dress chosen for her by her Coptic friend Suzanne to hide her Sudanese identity and make her look like a foreign girl, an Ethiopian or an Eritrean refugee. They also deliberately put a golden cross around her neck to make the Islamic judges and the Muslim public hate her as a cheap apostate Muslim girl who sold her religion and became an impure infidel Christian woman. This fake cross resembled her former cross. Her real cross, made of pure gold, which was brought to her by the kind Coptic family. But a female police officer confiscated it from her, and her other piece of jewelry were stolen the day she was arrested at Khartoum International Airport, bringing her to the Sharia court in that short, revealing dress of her body that is not aligned with traditional Islamic mores, is a demonstration of the extent to which the former Muslim girl has become immodest, immoral, outside the proper moral line of respectable, chaste Muslim young woman, and has become a provocative and sexually tempting after her apostasy from Islam and her conversion to the Christian religion. They should have brought her in an Islamic headscarf or hijab, abaya, and Sudanese sari, as they did when they took her to her so-called semi-legitimate Muslim husband Hassan to rape her for 3 nights in order to meet the definition of Islam, of marriage in Islam. After being brought inside the courtroom, the four large policewomen transferred the suspect inside to a high platform erected especially for her. As she sat on a small wooden chair, she could not hide her little black underwear from the eyes of the audience examining her half-naked body from head to toe. Her shoulders, arms, thighs, hips, large buttocks, big breasts, beautiful face, and long black hair were all exposed and visible to the general public, men, women, and children. Islam commands every Muslim woman to hide those seductive parts of her body from men because they are private and personal. The Prophet Muhammad said a woman is aura, and if she leaves her house, Satan will take care of her. In other words, the devil uses her to tempt men to commit adultery or a rape. The messenger of Allah also said that the woman comes in the form of the devil and retreats in the form of Satan. The half-naked young woman Intisar is sitting behind her. Behind her are the four policewomen, even though she had to dress deliberately in these immodest half panties and skin-tight sleeveless small shirt. The audience still saw her as a deer sitting in front of four female gorillas. This time, the ugly elephants did not remove the shackles and handcuffs of the imprisoned lovely gazelle. When the crowd satisfied their curiosity, alas about the striking beauty and erotic temptation of the sexy body of the disobedient, adulterous, and murderous runaway Muslim wife who had been captured and placed in a dungeon, the men began whispering and the women gossiping. Most males are ambivalent about the suspected beautiful and sexy girl. They love her, hate her, despise her sexuality, abhor her morality, desire her sexuality, abhor her morally, want her to live, and wish her to get killed. All females have negative attitudes toward the suspicious, lovely girl. They want her to be sentenced to death. Every woman who envies the beauty of the suspected girl hopes that her God Allah will perform a miracle by transferring Intisar's beauty and taking the ugliness of her face and the envy of her heart and blessing them on the apostate Muslim girl, Christian fiddle and adulterous wife, before she is stoned to death. Only the teenage girls and underage females had pity on the accused 17-year-old girl Intisar because they knew that what had happened to her and her lover Sami could have happened to any one of them with her secret boyfriend. At exactly 9:45 a.m., the Sharia judge and his religious assistants began to show up. A loud voice announced the arrival of the blessed Maulana Sheikh Al-Huda Abdul Nur, the judge of the Sharia court in Khartoum, Bahri, and his four Islamic assistants, Maulana Abdul Tawab Abdul Qadir, Maulana Sheikh Al-Tijani, Maulana Abdul Nabi Hasab al-Rasul, and Maulana Mamun al-Shaib. Everyone in the huge auditorium rose to their feet out of respect for their honorable rulers. The five men of God are dressed in shining white garments called jalabiyas. On their feet are leather shoes known as marakib, which is the plural of markub. Their white clothes resemble the izar al-ihram of the pilgrims in the city of Mecca. Their heads are covered with large white turbans. Their eyes are in glasses. Every single one of them seem to be nearsighted. They are very old. The youngest is Maulana Abdul Nabi Hasab al-Rasul, who is 66 years old. The oldest is Maulana Sheikh Al-Tijani, whose age was estimated at 88 years in the General Hospital. He has no birth certificate and no one knows where or when he was born. He is a senile old man who knows nothing of his past childhood. Many of his neighbors believe that he was born as an old man in the olden days. The other three ages fall somewhere between 66 and 88. The five justices have been assisted to fill their ruling seats. For example, three volunteers who are court cleaners help the aged man Maulana Sheikh Al-Tijani to get to his seat. Two grabbed his fragile shoulders and shaking arms, and when supported his pant back and prevented him from falling on his face and dying on the spot. At the same time, the old judge leans on his long walking cane as protection from falling forward or deviating to one side. The five ancient religious judges wasted half an hour to enter the spacious courtroom and take in their judgment seats. When the five virtuous men of Allah sat down, the people were relieved from the painful standing on their feet. In the meantime, the suspect wife Intisar has been looking downward since the time she was brought in. Only when the five legitimate judges were seated did she raise her head and look at them. Suddenly, her eyes focused on one of those old faces of her Islamic judges. If the apostate Muslim girl Intisar had seen Satan with his horns in his head in the flames of hell and a pitchfork in his hands, she might not have become so frightened and terrified as when she saw that bearded face. She saw that frightening, aged face that resembled the leader of the largest Islamic terrorist group in the world called the Muslim Brotherhood. This terrorist face took her back to the time when she was homeless, wandering the streets of the capital city without shoes, food, shelter, and money. She recalled her bitter experience when his bodyguards pushed her in front of the largest mosque in Khartoum city. Then she fell and hurt her lips and forehead. His prophetic words still resound in her ears. Which is better for you, to be the wife of one man or the wife of many men? Although his demonic predictions proved wrong, his words announced to her at the time that there was a future danger awaiting her down the road of her abusive life. Now he is sitting in the chair of Islamic justice as her Sharia judge. That day she begged him to give her food and shelter, and he gave her nothing. He even told his worshippers not to take home such a girl found in the streets. Today she is brought before him on serious charges such as apostasy, adultery, and bigamy. She knew and understood very well that he would not have mercy on her or spare her the most severe punishment by the Sharia law. The cold street girl saw him while he was looking at her with a sign of remembrance and warning. Then she saw him lean to his left side and to his right side and whisper some passwords to his assistants. The two judges then passed the secret whispers to the remaining two judges. Intisar now sees all five bearded faces looking at her with great displeasure. They are like voracious wolves looking down on their rabid and helpless deer prey. When the judge had conveyed his grave discovery to the other judges, he rose to his feet and began preaching his sermon, which was written and prepared in advance for the trial of apostasy. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, and praise and peace be upon the most honorable of messengers and prophets, our master and Prophet Muhammad, and upon all his family and companions. Allah, you are the most merciful of the merciful. O God, do not mislead our hearts after you have guided us, and have mercy on us. Amen. All the Muslim people in the court room shouted in unison after him, Amen. except the suspect girl who became a Christian. O group of Muslims, we have gathered today for a very great matter. This is something we only hear about with our ears and our readings in the ancient Islamic history books. We never expected to see it one day appear as a curse and abomination in reality. Who among you ever expected that one day a member of the truth of Islam, the religion of the seal of the prophets, Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Hashim ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Kilab, would abandon her beautiful religion and follow the lies of Satan? People with weak hearts and dead consciences may do so for material gains. A Muslim boy who has little faith in his religion, Islam, may fall in love with a beautiful Christian infidel girl, and in order to marry her, he may pretend to be a Christian to deceive her Christian family. A poor Muslim man who does not trust God may agree to sell his religion with the promise of earning a few US dollars or obtaining a foreign visa to immigrate to a Western country. We have all heard of few cases like this happening in other parts of the Muslim world, but never in this great Muslim country, Sudan. These apostate people, in fact, never really converted to Christianity, and so when they came before Sharia courts like this, they denied their conversion. The Islamic Sharia court may pardon these people if they acknowledge their hypocrisy and accept repentance and return to their true and tolerant Islamic religion. But it must strictly monitor them so that they do not report such hypocrisy. We, we expect them to pray 5 times a day so as not to give Satan a chance again to deceive and ensnare them. Today we have a similar case for such apostate Muslims, that is, this hypocritical Muslim woman who was brought before this honorable Islamic court, a girl who was born and raised in a Muslim home. This young woman inherited Islam from her father and grandfather. The first 2 words she learned from her parents before she said Papa and Mama were the name of Allah and His beloved Prophet Muhammad. Her trouble started when she fell in love with a guy. Our beautiful Islamic religion does not approve of the love relationship between a man and a woman except after the conclusion of an Islamic halal marriage contract between them through the guardian and the authorized mazun. Love before marriage is nothing but a ploy of the accursed Satan's tricks to trap a Muslim girl in the sin of adultery and to bring an abominable sexual scandal to her honorable family. When she commits this sin and becomes pregnant with an illegitimate child, the girl finds herself facing 2 bitter choices. Either she kills herself and hides her adultery and shame, or runs away from home and lives the rest of her life as a prostitute in a faraway city or another country. Yet this girl is standing before this esteemed court of justice has found a safe solution to her abhorrent sexual problem. She was apostatized from Islam, converted to Christianity, and married her infidel Christian lover who seduced her with his wealth, fornication, and infidelity. The judge stopped reading from his paper when he heard his 4 assistants and the audience gathered, all of them cursing Satan and seeking refuge with God from the evil of the major sins of apostasy, disbelief, and adultery. The judge himself cursed the stony devil and then resumed his religious sermon in the Sharia Islamic courtroom. This apostate girl already had a legitimate Muslim husband named Hassan Mahjub al-Hilali. Her secret Christian lover, with whom she cheated on her Muslim husband, is known as Sami Osman al-Tayyib. Although she is a married Muslim woman, at the same time she married her infidel Christian lover. Satan led her to fall in love with a man before marriage. Her love affair led her to commit adultery, apostasy, murder, and polyandry. Someone may ask me what the meaning of this last sin is. I swear by Almighty God and the glory of His noble prophet Muhammad, it is a sin I have never heard of before. Marriage of a woman with more than one man at the same time. Imagine the Ummah of Muhammad or a community of Islam, a woman who has two husbands at the same time, seek refuge in God from the accursed Satan and his evil plots. Of course, love led to adultery, adultery led to apostasy, apostasy led to bigamy, and polyandry led to cold blood murder. We all know that God Almighty in the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Nisa 4 verse 3 has given the Muslim man the right to practice polygamy. A man can have 4 wives at the same time, but a woman cannot have even 2 husbands at the same time. However, this married, accursed girl married 2 men at the same time. When the Sharia judge reached this point in his reading of his barbarous sermon written in advance, he suddenly stopped and looked at the so-called disobedient Muslim wife who was fleeing from the verdict of obedience. He is about to continue his sermon by directly citing his memory, but realized that 3 of his 4 assistants have fallen asleep, and one of them starts to snore loudly. He took the gavel from before him and hit his table 3 times in anger. The disturbance helped 2 of his aides come out of their deep slumber, but Maulana Sheikh Al-Tijani continued to snore. They yet ignored him because of his advanced age, his deaf ears, and his second childhood. A few months ago, the man of Allah continued his sermon in a loud voice. This apostate Muslim girl came to me, the same in her flesh and bones. At that time, she was a Muslim woman wearing a good Islamic abaya and hijab, the fairest lie. On that accursed Friday, the wife, fleeing from the ruling of obedience, Intisar was wearing a long dress and a Sudanese sari, but she was not wearing the Islamic abaya and veil, as he falsely claimed today. The judge stopped and carefully looked at the seductive, sexy girl as his lustful eyes scanned her half-exposed, sexy body from top to bottom. He does it as if he is trying to find a hidden little mole or a other beauty mark in her genitals. When his eyes were completely satisfied with their lust, and they did not discover that beautiful little birthmark in the sexy exposed body of the alleged rebellious wife, the man of God continues his morning sermon in court. She did not wear the shameful clothes she now wears, which are worn only by Abyssinian prostitutes, Egyptian movie actresses, and Western infidel women. I had just performed public Friday prayer in the largest mosque in Khartoum city. She was without shoes, food, shelter, or money. I swear by God Almighty and His Honorable Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace. If she were to wear this loose garment that she is now wearing, I would have commanded all the faithful Muslim men who performed Friday prayer behind me, to stone her to death in front of the largest house of Allah in this triangle capital city of Sudan. The Imam of the Blessed Grab Mosque, the bearded, frowning faced Maulana, the judge of the Sharia court, had to stop his fairy sermon when he heard the crowd clapping their hands in approval of his righteous anger. The applause and chanting of Allah Akbar continued for 5 minutes. Everyone clapped their hands except for the suspect, rebounding girl. Even her four ugly female police guards clapped their cricket bat-like hands. Then the honorable judge of the religious order of Dervish Sufis continued his sermon with the harsh voice of the Qul ogre. This runaway, Nash's disobedient Muslim wife who fled from the verdict of obedience came to the great mosque and asked me to help her. I asked her about her husband. She lied to me and told me she didn't have a husband. I asked her about her parents and her home. She said she ran away from home and her parents. I asked her why. She said that her Muslim family members, wanted to marry her to a man she did not love. She did not tell me that she had a Christian lover in the city of Khartoum and that she fled from her legal Muslim husband from the city of Gadari because of that adulterous infidel man. I told her that you ran away from one man and wanted to be the woman of many men. Which of the two options is better for you? She could not answer my question, which was a divine fatwa inspired to me by the God Almighty from seven heavens. Despite that, I took pity on her because she was a young Muslim woman. I gave her some money. Second lie. I told her to go back to her Muslim family and live with the husband they had chosen for her. She promised me she would follow my advice. Lie number 3. I gave my bodyguard some money and told him to go with her and buy new shoes and clothes and food for her and some presents for her family. Lie number 4. I also gave her money to buy a return pass ticket to Gadar City. The 5th lie. Unfortunately, although I advised her to rebuke the accursed Satan, the devil, and return to her Muslim husband and submit to his authority as a man, because the Quran commanded her to be obedient and be submissive wife, she did not follow my wise advice because the damning Iblis had already filled her heart with the sin of love and fornication. If she had followed my advice then, she wouldn't be here today. If she had accepted God's will and decree for her in life, she would not have committed adultery with her so-called Christian husband, whom she married through the priest in the Christian church and had sexual intercourse with in the forbidden haram relationship. If she had listened to my rational advice at that time, which was a fatwa inspired by Allah, she would not have subsequently become an impure, infidel, and apostate Muslim. Had she rebuked the devil and returned to her family, she would not have slaughtered her legal Muslim husband in cold blood on their wedding night. This apostate Muslim girl is a bad example of disobeying good advice. She disobeyed her family, rejected the advice of her religious leader, and followed Satan's footsteps. And look where the devil took her. He took her out of the beautiful religion of Islam and made her accept his lies. She followed one of his false religions, which he adorned with his cunning to deceive the deluded, unbelieving Christians. He made her commit adultery, apostasy, bigamy, and murder. She left Islam and became an infidel Christian girl. Look how the immoral infidel Christians made her to wear. Her bad clothing is exposing her aura or woman's nakedness. Even a Muslim street prostitute or an Egyptian film actress or Abyssinian Muslim whore might not wear such dirty dress. His Eminence, the Judge who is the Imam of the largest mosque in Sudan and the head of the Sharia judges in Khartoum city, stopped reading his sermon. Then his all eyes stared at the half-naked body of the so-called disobedient, apostate Muslim wife who had become an immoral, infidel Christian. After satisfying his lust by examining the half-exposed sexy body of Intisar, he continued reading his sermon. As I mentioned before, among the abhorrent religious crimes committed by this disobedient Muslim wife, there is one that I have not heard of before and do not know what the ruling on it in Islam is. A woman with two husbands, God forbid, and may Allah protect our to hear from one day in my long life that a Muslim woman would dare to marry two men together at the same time. One of them is a Muslim believer and the other is a Christian infidel. Even the countries of the cursed non-Muslim infidels that allow a male another male and a woman to wed another woman have not yet reached this low level of debauchery and immoral degradation of legalizing the marriage of a woman to two men at the same time. Even the most immoral and despicable infidel atheist or a feminist woman in the so-called liberal and developed secular Western world may not accept that she sleeps in bed and have sex with her in her vagina, the penis of two men at the same time. God has given a man the right to marry up to four women at the same time and have sex with them. Of course, this is for the wisdom of God alone to know its significance. If a woman has more than one husband or two men to have sex with her in bed, then she will be called either a prostitute or an adulteress because only these types of bad women can perform such a forbidden sexual act with more than one man at a time. Accordingly, based on the Sharia of God and his messenger, this apostate Muslim girl is considered an adulteress. Her second Christian marriage is invalid. Only her first Muslim marriage is recognized by this court. And when she had committed adultery with her Christian lover while she was married to a Muslim husband, according to the provisions of the law of the Holy Quran, the Sunnah, and the law of his messenger, Muhammad, so she must be stoned to death. The blessed man of God, his eminence, the Sharia judge, had to stop once again from continuing his fiery religious sermon when he heard the crowd of Muslims clapping their hands for his just Islamic ruling against the adulterous Muslim wife, which he delivered without favoritism and without fear. Some of the audience got to their feet and continued applauding for 10 minutes and shouting, Allah Akbar. The truth has come and falsehood vanished. The large crowd became very angry and hated bitterly the boasted adulterous Muslim wife Intisar when they did not see her crying nor react psychologically to the death sentence that was passed against her, which is stoning to death. As for her abhorrent sin of apostasy from Islam and conversion to Christianity, she must be given 3 days to repent and return to the religion of her fathers and grandfathers before we issue a death sentence against her by cutting off her head from her body with a sword. If she refuses to rebuke Satan and does not renounce Christianity and return to Islam within 3 days, she will be put to death by the sword. Even if she repents and returns to Islam, she should be stoned to death by Muslim men on Friday afternoon for the crime of adultery with her so-called Christian husband, while she was having a Muslim husband as covering, known as Hassan. Her public punishment must be witnessed by a group of Muslim believers as required by the Quran. The only difference would be if she returns to Islam, she will die as an adulterous Muslim woman and be buried in the Muslim cemeteries. If she refuses to return to Islam, she will die as an infidel Christian woman and be buried in the soil or graveyards of the infidel Christians. If Christians refuse to allow her body to be buried in their tombs, among their tombs, then her slain body should be burned by fire. All the four rightly guided caliphs of Islam, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, had the bodies of the Muslim apostates burned to ashes after executing them. When the judge finished his sermon and issued the Sharia judgment against the condemned girl, he rose to his feet. The other four religious judges, police officers, and all Muslims except for the old judge Maulana Sheikh At-Tijani also stood up. So the former volunteers came and carried the sleeping justice out of the courtroom. When the five judges left the courtroom, the audience became confused and entered into heated arguments and disputes among themselves. The reason for the confusion and controversy is the double ruling issued by the judge against the apostate woman, the infidel, and the adulterous Muslim wife Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. The first group argued that if the apostate Muslim girl refused to repent and return to the religion of her father and mother, Islam, then she should be beheaded. The second group claimed that she should be stoned to death for her adultery with her infidel lover Sami. The third group holds an extreme opinion that she should be stoned and beheaded. The holders of these extreme views were divided into two other extreme views. One group argued that the executioner should follow the chronology of her crimes, and since the disobedient Muslim wife first apostatized, and after her defection from Islam, she committed adultery with her impure infidel Christian lover. Therefore, her head must be cut off with the sword for the crime of apostasy first, and after that she should be stoned for the sin of adultery. The other group said that the executioner must follow the judge's rulings. Since the judge passed a judgment on her adultery and then spoke of her apostasy, the condemned girl must first be stoned to death and then beheaded. When the audience left the Sharia courtroom and dispersed in the four directions, these arguments and disputes spread like a deadly epidemic or a coronavirus in every street, house, school, mosque, restaurant, office, shop, club, wine, bar, brothel, house of prostitutes, public toilet, corner and cranny in the triangle capital city of Sudan. Then they flew at the speed of sound to all the suburbs of Khartoum city and traveled at the speed of light to other cities and towns until they crossed the borders and spread throughout North Africa, the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, and other countries of the Islamic world. On that fateful day, the third innocent girl Intisar was convicted of apostasy and adultery and was sentenced to execution by stoning to death, and her head was to be cut off from her body with a sword. Her double death verdicts were counted by the Muslims of Sudan, and the despicable old geezer Osman Setan al-Taib and his remaining gang members as winning a victory over their sworn enemy, who is called the Nashis, disobedient, rebellious, runaway, evil, murderer, cheap apostate Muslim, impure Christian infidel, filthy adulteress, and the poor, despicable whore Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. Chapter 87. The apostate Muslim girl and the 3 days of repentance. The 3 days of repentance is based on the idea that the apostate Muslim had either been brainwashed by some Christian infidels or emotionally blackmailed because of his mad love for a charming Christian girl, or the church given him some material gains, such as a large sum of money or a promise of a visa to immigrate to a Western country. Based on this assumption, some Muslim scholars will try to convince the apostate and pressure him to return to his true and beautiful religion of Islam, because it is the only true religion that exists in the entire universe, as they believe. If they fail to win him back in this way, they will resort to cajoling him through some material promises, such as he will have a beautiful virgin Muslim bride, a free house, a good job, and some money to help him in his life. If they do not succeed in winning him back through this method, they will try to put psychological and emotional fears in his mind and religious terror in his heart. They will tell him what his punishment will be if he refuses to repent and return to Islam within 3 days, which is death for his apostasy. They will also remind him of suffering in the grave and eternal life in hellfire. He will be told that he will live forever, burning in a fire whose fuel is people and stones. They will remind him of the bull snake that will bite him daily in his grave. If he gives to that pressure, he will be watched day and night for a very long time. During this period, he must pray 5 times a day and attend the mosque regularly. He must read 114 surahs of the Holy Quran and memorize them. His behavior should be watched by the entire Muslim community. In most cases, the apostate's family would try to get rid of him on the grounds that he had already brought great shame on the family. His case will be treated worse than a Muslim girl who committed adultery before marriage and must be slaughtered and killed in an honor killing by her outraged Arab father or angry Muslim brother at her at, because of her outrageous act of fornication. If he escapes this kind of harsh punishment, every other Muslim family will make sure that their sons and daughters are not associated with this cursed person. He will be socially boycotted and hated by all. In addition to all these strict measures, the former apostate cannot dream of marrying a Muslim girl from any family, even if she is from the poorest family in the whole world, and she is the ugliest young woman in the entire universe. He will be treated as someone who carries a deadly plague or an infectious diseases such as AIDS, Ebola, or coronavirus. This kind of harsh social treatment may drive a repentant apostate into despair and eventually lead him to commit suicide. However, no one would expect the apostate Muslim girl's case to end this way because she has already been tried and convicted by the Sharia court as an adulteress. And for this unforgivable sin, she will be stoned to death. The countdown to the 3 days of repentance began the next day after Intisar stood before God's heavenly court, and the judge of the Sharia court condemned her to the penalties of apostasy, adultery, and blunder. After the five judges questioned her, and the verdict of God and his messenger Muhammad passed on her, Intisar was sentenced twice. She should be stoned to death for her abominable sin of fornication with her Christian lover Sami. Her head must be cut off with the sword, and her body burned with fire for the sin of apostasy from Islam and conversion to Christianity. Whatever the case, if she repents and returns to her former faith, her second punishment, which is beheading with the sword, will be forfeited. Yet her body must be buried in the ground up to her neck and stoned to death. After being killed in this brutal Islamic way, only then can she die as a repentant Muslim girl who may or may not go to heaven. It all depends on the mood and mercy of Allah to admit her into the paradise of the 72 virgins or not. If the number of the virgins decreases for the 72 virgins, for the righteous men of God in the Garden of Eden, beneath which rivers flow, in which there are rivers of wine, milk, and honey, then she will be given to a faithful Muslim man to complete the number of the nymphs, who are 72 virgin teenage girls. The horrific police inspector Sakina Khalafallah Abduddin, as usual, came with three other large policewomen to the cell of Intisar's grave and took her to the iron police cage in which they took her before to the house of obedience to an alleged Muslim husband Hassan, whom she slaughtered in defense of her honor. Then they brought her to another place where some religious scholars gathered to argue with her in the best way. The venue is an office at Omdurman Islamic University. This prestigious Sudanese university is equal in religious sciences and the light of Islamic education to the University of Al-Azhar Sharif University in Egypt and Al-Zaytuna University in Tunisia. The scholars are 15 in number. All of them are religious male professors and female professors at Omdurman Islamic University in Khartoum. All of these 15 great teachers studied jurisprudence and Islamic law and ilm al-kalam and graduated from Al-Azhar University in Cairo. There are 10 men and 5 women. Among the 15 are 7 Sudanese and 8 Egyptians, 3 female professors from Sudan, and 2 women teachers from Egypt. When the apostate Muslim girl Intisar was brought to them, she found that they had prepared a place for her to sit in their midst. She was forced to sit on a small wooden chair in the middle of a circle surrounded by these Slavic scholars. They all sit in large armchairs, except for the Christianized woman. When she raised her head and looked at their faces, she saw angry and unfriendly people. It seemed that they gathered to pray for her funeral instead of guiding her to the truth. The men have long beards, and the women wrap their bodies in huge gowns known as abayas and veils. Two Sudanese female professors wear niqabs and look like black ghosts. The Loshi girl wears her tiny t-shirt, which is sleeveless, and her skinny shorts. Willy-nilly, Intisar knew in advance that whatever they would tell her and whatever she would tell them, the outcome of this unnecessary meeting would be disappointing to both parties. There is no way to convince her that the religion of Islam has nothing to do with her intractable problem, and in no uncertain terms she can make them believe that the only religion that solves her problem is Christianity. She also knows that no human being can bring darkness and light together or reconcile God with Satan. Anyway, this is just a formality, and whether she agrees or not, she has to attend the meeting and argue with them as by Islamic law. Intisar sits on her gas chair and bows her head down. She could feel their presence around her, like the blazing rays of the sweltering African heat that like mouses and big nostrils breathing menacingly. After a long silence, Intisar began to hear a deep and majestic voice that began to speak to her. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, and praise and peace be upon the most honorable of messengers, our master and our beloved prophet, Muhammad bin Abdullah, and upon all his family and companions. O God, do not mislead our hearts after you have guided us, and have mercy on us because you are the most merciful of the merciful. The brothers and sisters in Islam, as you all know, this apostate Muslim wife who became an infidel Christian woman is brought before us to lead her to the truth, God willing, and liberate her mind from the illusion of falsehood that the accursed Satan led her to. We have 3 days to argue with her, with that which is best, to show her the light of the truth of Islam. If she has doubts, we will try to honestly and lovingly to remove her doubts. If she was misled by some Christian, we must free her mind from their misguidance. If she gets mixed up with some teachings about Islam on the rights of Muslim women, we must free her mind from them. If she is bought at a low price, we must make her understand that the pleasures of this earthly and fleeting world are much lower than the enjoyment of the other world in the eternal bliss of paradise, with the righteous and the martyrs, with the virgins in a paradise as wide as the heavens and the earth, beneath which rivers flows wine, milk, honey, and undiluted water. Oh God, did I report? Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir, the apostate Muslim girl, hear her name being called by one of the Sudanese professor. She recognized the speaker as a Sudanese teacher from her Arabic accent. You must answer loudly, clearly, truthfully, and honestly the question I am going to ask you now. Do you have any confusion and misunderstanding about Islamic teachings of the rights of the Muslim wife? Intisar hesitated for a moment before she said, No, I have no confusion or misleading or a misunderstanding. Has anyone deceived your heart or confused your understanding of Islam's teaching on women? Not at all. Do you have some doubt or confusion about the veracity of Islam? I have no doubts or confusion in my correct understanding of what Islam is. Did you get some money or receive a visa for a foreign country? Or did someone promise to marry you if you convert to Christianity? I did not leave Islam and become a Christian girl because of any of these things. So why did you change your religion from Islam to Christianity? Because I faced an intractable problem in the Islamic religion, and I did not find any solution to it except in the Christian religion. Have you tried to find a mosque imam, a Muslim scholar, or a female teacher of Islamic education in your school to help you find the correct solution to your difficult problem within the teachings of Islam inspired from heaven in the Holy Quran and the correct prophetic hadiths of our infallible Prophet Muhammad before you convert to Christianity? My problem has no solution in Islam because it is caused by Islam itself. Did Islam tell you to fall in love with a man before marriage? Or did Islam command you to flee from your Muslim husband, from your family's house, and from the verdict of obedience of the Sharia court? I did nothing wrong when I fell in love with Sami. We did not commit any sin or crime by loving each other. We as Christians got married in the church through the pastor or a priest. So I became Sami's holy Christian wife, and he became my holy Christian husband. I did not leave the home of my Muslim family because they wanted to marry me to a man I did not want to marry. I ran away from the policemen because they wanted to implement the obedience ruling issued against me by the judge of the Sharia court in the Gadarif city. And they were about to take me by force to the house of obedience to live with a man whom I did not marry of my own free will and never wanted to marry. Another man's voice said, but you at least know that no good Muslim parents would allow their virgin Muslim daughter to fall in love with a man before marriage and run away from home and marry him. Islam forbids marriage before love before marriage. I didn't run away with my beloved Sami because I wanted to marry him. As I told you, I ran away from the police when they tried to take me to the house of obedience by force. But at least you know that your irrational behavior has led you to this bad end. Female voice interrupted. You cannot convince this rebellious woman that falling in love before marriage is a sin. Another university professor named Mohsen said, if we do not convince her, we cannot expect her to return to the truth of Islam. From his Arabic accent, the boasted girl recognized him as an Egyptian teacher. Listen, Brother Mohsin, we are not here to bargain with her about the veracity of Islam. We are here to make this woman understand that she is unfaithful to her religion, rebellious against her family, and disloyal to her Muslim husband. From his broken Arabic accent, the apostate girl recognized him as a Sudanese professor from either Darfur province or the Nuba Mountains. Professor Mohsen said, agree with you, my brother Ibrahim, but our religion requires us to argue with her in the best way. Intisar, do you agree with me that a Muslim girl of good morals must accept what her family has chosen for her as a husband? The late evil man Hassan Mahjoub al-Hilali, whom I killed when he tried to rape me, was not my family's choice for me. It was my criminal half-brother Umar who sold me to him as a slave. It was an evil plot created against my beloved Sami and I to separate us and prevent us from marrying each other. The Sharia court judge tried to help them enslave me And then I was supposed to agree to be raped by the selfish man Hassan. So I refused to the Sharia court's obedience ruling and fled. But at least the consequences would have been better for you if you had accepted your brother's choice. And I do not think that there is any Muslim man who will sell his sister as a slave to another man, as you claim. An angry Sudanese female teacher shouted, "Stop it, please! Please stop this nonsense talk. We did not come here to discuss the social and romantic problems of love. We have gathered here to discuss religious issues. Do you have any mundane issues that are not clear to you, Intisar?" "I don't have religious issues, but the teachings of the religion of Islam on women and Islamic law created from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad have supported some evil men who have tried to separate me from my beloved boyfriend Sami and destroyed my life." When she spoke those bold words against Islam, the boasted girl suddenly felt that a large hand of a man had slapped her in the face and sent her entire body on the green carpet. Intisar thought she was attacked by a jungle beast. "I seek refuge in God from saying this blasphemy," the leader of the Muslim scholars group shouted after he angrily hit the boasted Muslim girl in her face. Then the Egyptian university professor Mohsin helped Intisar to her feet and led her to her hot seat. "Please, Dr. Ibrahim, control yourself and your anger and refrain from using your hand again. We are educated Muslims and we should use our brains, not our hands, to prove the truth of our beautiful religion. Islam is a religion of peace, not a religion of violence." After that, the Egyptian professor said to the apostate girl, "Do you mean to tell us, Intisar, that Islam encouraged and supported an evil plot against you and your lover Sami?" Intisar shouted angrily and said at the top of her voice, "Yes, Islam helped them achieve their evil purpose against us. The Sharia court and the police authority in Gaddafi city supported their evil plots and helped them implement them against my late innocent sister Firdos. Because of the obedience ruling issued by the Sharia court judge against my innocent minor sister, she was kidnapped from her home by 5 policemen and taken as a disobedient Muslim wife to an old man as old as her grandfather. That wicked old man, who claimed to be her legal Muslim husband, chained her, starved her, beat her, raped her to death. The same unjust Muslim judge of the Sharia court in Gaddafi city issued against me the ruling of slavery, which Islamic Sharia calls the verdict of obedience against the disobedient Muslim wife. And that promoted me to flee from my family, home, and arrive in a truck to this big city that is called the capital of Sudan. Then I wandered aimlessly for 3 days on the streets without money, food, or shelter. Everywhere I went, people took advantage of me and abused me until God intervened and guided me to the truth of Christianity, where my beloved Sami and I found a solution to our intractable problem caused by the misogynistic teachings of Islam. You are an apostate Muslim wife and also an impure Christian infidel woman. Stop saying this blasphemy against Islam before I cut off your tongue." A very angry woman screamed out loud these words. She's a university professor at Al Ahfad College for Women. From her Arabic accent, Intisar knew that she was Sudanese lady. Professor Mohsen said, "Oh, Intisar, do you know that you have spoken lies against Islam? I spoke the truth about Islam. I will say it and repeat it again. If my late sister Firdos was born as a Christian, so the evil old man Osman al-Taib could not have kidnapped her from her family's house through the verdict of obedience and brought her by the police to the house of obedience where he tied her, beat her, starved her, and raped her to death. Islam is what gave him the right to do all these evils on my innocent underage sister Firdaus. Even I was persecuted a lot because of Islam, and I still suffer today. If my friend Sami and I had been born Christians, we would not have faced such grave injustice. All the evils that befell us are because of Islam. Therefore, Islam can never be from a loving and just God. Islam is purely evil and a religion inspired by Satan. The Lord Jesus Christ is God, and Muhammad is a false prophet who was inspired by Satan to come up with an evil religion like Islam that gives men the power to abuse women. Islam produces nothing good for the world except hatred, terrorism, and terrorists. Christianity is from God and produces goodness, peace, and love in the world. Christians are followers of the true religion. Christian men do not abuse their women and treat them as equals. A Christian girl can fall in love, choose her life partner, and marry him, and no one can stop her from doing so. Neither her father nor her brother can force her to marry a man she does not love or want to marry. There is no Christian religious court like the Islamic Sharia court or any police authority in the entire world that can force a Christian girl to live with a man she does not agree to live with as a husband and a wife against her will. Christian men do not marry underage daughters as Muslim men do. The Prophet Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl called Aisha, and he had sex with her when she was 9 years old. How can any same person who has an iota of humanity and love in his heart call the man who had sex with 9-year-old girl the master of creation and whom God sent as mercy to humanity? Muhammad came to destroy humanity through the alleged prophet of God. Muhammad came to destroy humanity through his mujahideen and gave his followers the right to kill and persecute non-Muslim men and rape and dominate their female counterparts, old and young. Early in the history of the spread of Islam, the bloodthirsty Muslim Mujahideen killed 80 million Hindus and 60 million Christians during their demonic invasions throughout the known world at that time. They killed innocent men who were called infidels by Muslims and raped countless numbers of their women, enslaved their children, and seized their lands and occupied them. Therefore, the false Prophet Muhammad is the master of death and destruction. He is not a mercy for women, but rather a curse for them. He taught men to practice many evil practices against women, such as polygamy, child marriage, wife beating, female genital mutilation of their private parts, and many other woman teachings. Christian men do not marry 4 wives or divorce their wives as Muslim men do. They do not mutilate their children's genitals through circumcision as Muslims do to their young daughters and destroy their sexual organs and kill their sexual desire forever. And they do not beat their wives, daughters, and sisters, and they do not kill them in honor kill crimes. The Quran allows men to beat their women in Surah An-Nisa 3 verse 34. This is why none of you sitting here or another Muslim out of the 1.5 billion Muslims in the world can convince me that Islam is not inspired by Satan to the false prophet Muhammad, and that Christianity is not the true religion that was revealed by the loving and just God through his righteous Jewish prophets and Christian apostles of Jesus Christ. Only Satan can inspire a misogynistic religion that abuses women and hates what he has been falsely called unclean infidels like Islam that produces terrorism and terrorists. While the said innocent girl Intisar bravely speaks her opinion of Islam and bursts out her heart, eight of the so-called scholars put their fingers in their ears, and the other seven trembled with anger. They all felt as if she had hypnotized them or paralyzed their bodies. None of the professors could stop her or hurt her until she spoke everything in her mind and heart until she stopped herself. Then the leader of the group screamed out while his mouth was foaming like a raging camel. Shut up, you cursed, apostate Muslim, woman, impure Christian, infidel, unfaithful adulterous wife, and evil murderous whore. How dare you open your filthy mouth and speak such unwarranted blasphemy against Islam, the religion of truth, peace, mercy, justice, and equality between man and woman. A Sudanese woman who is a university professor at Al-Ahfad College shouted to her, "You are a cursed apostate girl." An Egyptian professor shouted at her, "May the curses of God, his angels, and all people be upon you." Stop here. The group leader shouted again in a ghoulish voice of an ogre as his mouth frosted like a raging ox and his body trembled in indescribable fury. An Egyptian professor said that there is no point in talking to such an infidel girl as she is an impure Christian and a cursed apostate. Another very angry Sudanese female teacher said to her, "Satan has climbed onto your body and taken charge over your heart and mind and has sex with your fucking pussy. You have married yourself to the devil and become his wife. The religious ruling of the Sharia court is correct and must be implemented on her. We tried to guide her to the right path, but she resisted every effort. And instead of listening to us and learning the truth of Islam from our mouths, she uttered every evil blasphemy against the right of our Islamic religion uh, and cursed our infallible Prophet Muhammad. May God bless him and grant him peace." The leader shouted in a loud voice while his mouth was still foaming, "In the name of God Almighty and His honorable messenger, the master of creation who has been sent by Allah as mercy to mankind, we are declaring this vile, cursed girl an infidel and apostate Muslim. She must be executed because of her apostasy from Islam, her Christianization, and her blasphemy against the veracity of the true religion, Islam, and the Prophet of mercy, Muhammad. We don't need to meet this evil apostate woman again," shouted the Egyptian Professor Muhsin. "We all agree with the leader of this religious intellectual group consisting of 15 male and female Muslim university professors. Then our meeting ended with this damning apostate girl, and so the leader of the so-called educated Muslim university teachers concluded the meeting with these threatening words. His words are like a death sentence pronounced by a harsh Muslim judge. When the negative decision of the 15 university scholars reached the Sharia court, the 5 judges declared that the condemned girl Intisar an apostate and an infidel, and they issued the death sentence on her. Their final verdict was published in many local newspapers, TV channels, and radio stations. The day of the execution was set for next Sunday morning at 10 a.m. The execution will take place in the Freedom Square in Khartoum City. Every believing Muslim, male or female, has been invited to attend at the specified time and place to participate in the execution of the adulterous wife, the cursed apostate, and the unclean infidel who is condemned to apostasy, blasphemy, adultery, polyandry, murder, forgery, and high treason. Chapter 88, Executing the Death Sentence on the Apostate Muslim Girl. For a sensitive, nostalgic, and sentimental person like me to visit the innocent third girl Intisar who is condemned to be executed as an apostate and adulteress in her cell and see her miserable conditions on her last day before her execution may not be a good idea. Suffice it to say that her grief, suffering, psychological state of mind, and physical torture cannot be described in any human language. So, to avoid such a sad experience, we will mention only two important events that happened before she was sent to her cruel death in the Freedom Ground. In the first event, she was taken to the hospital to undergo a pregnancy test. The test result came back negative. The imprisoned Christian wife Intisar miscarried her child, which she conceived with her Christian husband Sami during the 3 days of her fight, struggle, and deadly battle with her rapist, who was named by Islam her alleged legitimate Muslim husband Hassan. The second event, she is visited by her dear friend Salah and Muna in prison. The purpose of their visit is to ask the prison administration to hand over the body of the said innocent girl Intisar after her execution. The prison authority refused the request on the grounds that the body would be buried in the prison graveyard if the Coptic Christians of Khartoum city refused to grant her a place to bury her in their cemetery. If her body is buried inside the prison, her family and friends can only claim her bones after 14 years of imprisonment. In this way, the prison authority will also fulfill her 14-year hard labor sentence imposed against her by the criminal court. Moreover, they were informed that the Sharia court demanded that the body of the apostate Muslim girl be cremated, cremated and her ashes buried in the prison cemetery. The bodies of the vagrant and unknown female prisoners are usually buried there. The recognized lawyer Salah also sent a letter to the President of Sudan in which he requested a presidential pardon for the so-called apostate wife and adulteress convicted of death because she is a 17-year-old teenage girl who suffered so many abuses and injustices. Before sending his petition to the Republican Palace, Lawyer Salah was able to collect nearly 2,000 signatures of human rights activists, feminists, and some communist, atheists, and human rights advocates in Sudan. Unfortunately, the request for a presidential pardon, present, presidential pardon for the girl convicted of apostasy was rejected. The Sudanese president swore to divorce one of his wives if the apostate Muslim girl who converted to Christianity and blasphemed against the Prophet Muhammad was not executed. The president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, made the same oath of divorcing his Muslim wife with the condemnation to death of the former apostate Maryam Ishaq, but he was forced by Italy to revoke his decision. One of the ministers of Italy came from Rome to Khartoum and threatened him that they would send the NATO troops and bombard the capital city of Sudan and the president palace if the innocent Christian woman Maryam is executed as an apostate Muslim woman. Sadly, in the case of the condemned apostate Muslim girl Intisar, no one came for her rescue. However, an important emergency meeting was held the night before the day of the execution. It has to do with the way the execution is to be carried out. The prison authority received an official document of the death sentence from the Sharia court one day before the execution. The Sharia court stated that the apostate Muslim girl, an adulteress convicted of death, must be stoned to death by a crowd of Muslims in public place according to the recommendation of the Holy Quran regarding the punishment of the married adulterous wife. Then her corpse should be taken out of the ground and her head beheaded according to the hadith of the messenger of Allah. May God's praise and peace be upon him, in which he said, whoever changes his religion, kill him. The administration of the woman's prison became very upset about these two strange demands. That is why they have to convene an urgent and secret meeting to decide on such an abnormal matter. The meeting took place late in the evening and lasted for 6 long hours. Many senior government officials and top police officers attended the meeting. The main agenda of the meeting is to decide on the manner in which the death sentence would be carried out. First of all, the members discussed the two demands made by the Sharia court. They discovered that never before in Sudan had the death sentence being carried out in such an Islamic manner. All previous records show that hanging was the only way executions were carried out. Even if the prison authority accepts the two demands of the Sharia court, it will have to face the problem of finding someone to decapitate the convict after she has been stoned to death. There is no execution in Sudan trained for this type of execution. Decapitation only occurs in Saudi Arabia. The prison authority could not expect the Saudi government to send a double-edged sword executioner to Khartoum to decapitate the corpse of a female criminal convicted of apostasy. Secondly, stoning had not happened in Sudan before. The Muslims of Sudan have no idea how to implement that Islamic punishment. Again, only Saudi Muslims stone adulterers until today. It is impossible for the Khartoum prison authorities to send a girl to sentenced to apostasy to Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, or Riyadh to be stoned by Muslim men there. Even if the prison allowed stoning on the grounds of Freedom Squares, the massive crowd might stone each other. Such chaos may lead to severe injuries and many deaths among the thousands of innocent people, including many women, children, and the elderly. Accordingly, the members of the meeting collectively reached a decision that the correct way to carry out the execution is to hang the apostate and adulterous Muslim wife on some gallows in front of everyone in Freedom Square. In this way, the prison administration will fulfill the desire of everyone who comes there to see the condemned girl being hanged to death. After the prison administration reached this decision, it was too late to inform the public. Therefore, informing the public of the message of execution was postponed to the day of the execution itself. At 9 a.m., the afflicted apostate girl was removed from her grave by the dreaded policewoman Sakina, Khalafallah Abduddin, and the other three huge female policewomen. At first, the third innocent girl, Intisar, resisted and cried and begged them for mercy. She also held on to her cell door and fought back by kicking biting and scratching their faces. The four female police elephants used their male strength and tore her slender hands from the iron bars. Then the evil police woman, Sakina Khalafallah Abduddin, hurt her face and body with several very painful blows and slaps to subdue and control her until they could take her to the gallows in the freedom ground. After the painful blows and physical torture that no human beings can bear, weakened the feminine resistance of Intisar in exchange for their male-like ability, she was dragged to an all-war house in the women's prison in Kobar Central Prison. Then she was forced to carry 3 heavy planks of wood. Inspector Sakina had told her that the planks of wood would be the gallows in which she would be hung to death in less than an hour. The girl on death roll fell several times under those heavy wooden bulls before she could reach the police car. By this time, the Christian bride Intisar had become very weak and had lost much of her strength due to starvation, disease, and torture inside the prison. Every time she fell, she had to get up through kicking, hitting, and slapping. On that last day, the third innocent girl Intisar wished to be hung as soon as possible because she believed that her execution would be a mercy, not a curse for her. When the heavy planks were finally taken inside the moving cage, the police wagon began moving toward the ground of freedom. Once again, to avoid describing the psychological traumas and physical tortures that tormenting the mind, heart, and body of the convict Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir, we must go directly to the place of her execution. Since early Sunday morning, Freedom Square began to receive the faithful stone throwers. They came young and old, men and women, healthy and sick. They came from every cranny and deep valley. The blind carried the crippled and lame on their backs, mothers holding their infants. They arrived by cars, buses, rickshaws, on foot, riding donkeys, horses, and camels. They are like the people of Gog and Magog in their abundance. They also like swarms of bees and ants, or of flies and mosquitoes. They came from everywhere in the triangle capital city of Sudan, from the surrounding suburbs and villages. By 8 a.m., the large ground of Freedom Square was filled to capacity. There is no place for an apple to fall. The later comers climbed trees, walls, and ceilings. All the surroundings streets were filled with people. Each one carries either stones or bricks. Some have swords, spears, sticks, machetes, knives, and hammers in their hands. Everyone is constantly shouting Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. The wide square of Freedom Ground was filled with intense police security. Numerous police cars and military trucks unloaded countless policemen and soldiers. The army soldiers are heavily armed to the teeth, and the police officers are fully armed and ready for any riot or violence. They carry rifles, machine guns, large wooden patterns, and some iron clubs. Some of the police men on horseback carry long whips. These weapons were carried for self-defense or riot control by law enforcement officers, corrections personnel, and military personnel. Other uses for batons include mob control or dispersing crowds of rioters. They also hold some large shields in their hands. Their bodies are fully protected by military style body armors and helmets. They are armed and ready as if they are at war and are about to attack the camps of their sworn enemies at any moment. 0 hours has finally arrived. At 9:30 a.m., the mobile police cage carrying the apostate and adulterous Muslim wife, her hunger, and her four female guards arrive at Freedom Square. The carriage passes through a narrow corridor surrounded by police guards. People rose to their feet to see the cursed girl, and their hatred for her increased when they read in the newspapers the report of the 15 Muslim scholars who met her and tried to argue with her in the best way and convince her to rebuke Satan and repent from her apostasy and return to Islam. The negative report of the university professor included the exact details of every word they said to her and every blasphemous where she supposedly uttered with her slanderous tongue against Islam. The so-called educated Muslim scholars knew and understood that none of them could refute her words or respond to her condemnation of the religion of Islam and the fact she said about the Christian religion. They decided to stir up the religious sentiments of Muslims against the apostate, adulterous, and blasphemous wife. Many people have come to avenge the blasphemies that she has spoken against their beautiful religion of Islam and their infallible Prophet Muhammad, who they all believe is the master of creation and came to perfect morals, and God sent him as a mercy to mankind. They just want to stone and break the cursed girl. Their threatening cries continued to get louder and louder. Many of them entered a state of religious trance. Some became devout ascetics and began to perform circular dances and vigorous chanting as act of ecstatic devotion, like well-living dervishes. They possess an exuberant energy as they danced, jerked, and shrieked as if they were possessed by demons of rage. Some Sufi bands came with loud drums and started dancing, shouting, and chanting in unison. There, there are many religious behaviors going on within the vast land of Freedom Square, but we don't need to bother ourselves with these fanatics. One last thing to mention, and then we head straight to the gallows location. There are hundreds of sailors of water, Jewish religious books, prayer beads, amulets, talismans, veils, hijabs, niqabs, blessed, and many other things. Some people sell sacred stones and bricks. The seller of these two sacred objects claim that they brought them from the tombs and domes of the righteous saints of God who died hundreds of years ago. Some people sell the holy water of Zamzam well, which they claim to have brought with them upon their return from the Hajj rituals of pilgrims in Mecca and Medina cities. Some people sell bowls full of milk and camel urine because the Prophet Muhammad recommended drinking them like medicine to treat many diseases that have no cure medicine to treat. This milk and urine of the female camel is the most expensive and most demanded. The Prophet Muhammad said in an authentic hadith that in the urine of a female camel there is medicine. Whether or not this disgusting prophetic medicine is healthy or harmful, only God knows. I would rather die of an incurable disease than drink the bitter and poisonous urine of a she camel. Logical sense says that if the urine is good and beneficial to health, the she camel will not urinate it. However, after the arrival of the police wagon, the crowds expected to see the apostate and adulterous wife being taken out by her God, dug a hole for her, and buried up to her neck. After that, they must proceed to fulfill the judgment of God and his messenger over her by stoning her to death. Instead, they saw some police men rushing toward the carriage and appearing to pull the three planks off. Then they led them out in the open and began to dig with excavators quickly into the ground. In a short time, they erected the gallows and brought the rope and fixed it at the top so that all could see it. Crowds of faithful Muslims were surprised to see the gallows. They asked each other why the news was there. Before anyone could provide an answer to the above question, a loudspeaker was heard announcing through a handheld microphone the decision of the prison authority. Ladies and gentlemen, may God's peace, mercy, and blessing be upon you all. On behalf of the Women Detention Authority in Kobar Central Prison, I'm here to tell you that the death sentence for the girl convicted of apostasy and adultery will not be carried out by stoning or beheading her, but the convict will be hanged to death on the gallows. This execution will be carried out in the presence, deliberation, hearing, and testimony of everyone. She will be hanged to death within a few minutes. This is by order of a legal decree issued by the prison authority. If anyone is caught throwing a stone or a brick at the convicted girl, her bodyguard, security personnel, and medical staff, he will be arrested immediately and he will be punished later with imprisonment for a period of up to 6 years or a fine of 5 billion Sudanese pounds or both penalties together. Strict orders were also issued to all police officers and army soldiers to beat, arrest, and shoot with live bullets anyone who tries to attack them. We therefore ask you, behave well, be a good citizen, and maintain public order. After the convicted girl is hanged, her body will be examined by a qualified medical doctor. When he is convinced of her death, he will officially announce her death. Once this is done, the police car will transport the dead girl's body to the prison building where it will be buried. This is in implementation of the 14-year prison sentence under hard labor issued by the criminal court for the woman convicted of killing her Muslim husband, the late Martha Hassan Mahjoub al-Hilali. You are not allowed to go unless you hear an announcement on the microphone that you are free to go. These restrictions are for security purposes. I repeat, unless you hear the announcement that you are free to move, you are not allowed to go. This announcement is repeated 6 times in Arabic and 3 times in English. Of course, the religious leaders and the rest of the Muslim believers are not happy with the sudden change in the method of carrying out the execution of the convict, apostate, and adulterous girl Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. They too were offended and became very angry at the change of the method of execution from the Islamic method to the Western Christian method. They know that there is no hanging in the death penalty in Islam. Their religion commands execution by stoning, beheading, or crucifixion. Hanging is a foreign method of execution brought to Sudan by the British colonists more than a century ago when they invaded and occupied many Muslim countries. Why should the blasphemous, apostate, and adulterous Muslim wife be killed in a Christian way and not killed in an Islamic way? These questions and many more were put to each other by the huge crowd, and each of them decided to kill the girl convicted of apostasy and adultery by stoning to death. Whatever the policemen and army soldiers do to them, the Muslims and their leaders have decided to implement Allah's judgment on her with their stones before hanging her. They are waiting for her to get out of the police wagon, and then they can shower her with rocks and bricks. At 10:15 a.m., the police car door was opened, and the four policewomen came out with the sentenced girl. Co- Convicted wife Intisar wears shorts and tight sleeveless shirt and tall boots. The Sharia court recommended that she be brought before the believing Muslim in her scandalous and disgraceful Christian dress that contradicts Islamic law, which was gifted to her by the believing Christians who brainwashed her and converted her to their false and corrupt religion. The police inspector Sakina securely grabs the convict's hand and pulls her toward the noose. This time, by order of the prison authority, the handcuffs and shackles were removed from her hands and feet. Most likely, the Sudanese government does not want to allow Christians who have infiltrated themselves among Muslims to use their cell phone cameras and film the apostate Muslim woman who converted to Christianity with her hands and feet tied, and then upload their photos and videos to the internet. In the cases of the trials at the criminal court and the Sharia court, the Sudanese government has prohibited entry to any man or a woman who does not have an Islamic names, and has prevented the admission of anyone who has name that show that he's a Christian or she's a Christian woman. But in a public place open to everyone, such as Freedom Square, this method of racism and religious discrimination cannot be applied, even though security men and government spies are spread like locusts everywhere. Once again, Intisar made unsuccessful efforts to resist the huge policewoman from taking her from the police car to the gallows. As usual, the huge dinosaur policewoman Sakina raised her big hands, which like two sick sticks, slap her on the face, kick her with police boots on her body until she subdued her under her control, then grab her left hand and proceed to drag her forward by force. When the crowds of Muslims saw the so-called cursed apostate Muslim girl, the impure Christian infidel, and the murderous, adulterous, traitorous wife, they began shouting and chanting in unison, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The screaming kept getting louder and louder. Meanwhile, the evil policewoman, Sakina Khalafallah Abduddin, continued to drag Intisar by force until they reached the gallows. Again, the convicted girl starts screaming, kicking, and biting the policewoman's huge hands, but all her struggles are in vain. The cries of the Muslim believers continued to grow more and more intense. The executioners then proceed to lower the rope until it reached Intisar's neck. The angry cries of the crowd at the change in the method of execution have turned into curses and insults against the prison authorities, female guards, and police officers. By then, the executioner had grabbed the noose and was about to bless it like a wreath of flowers and roses around Intisar's neck. At that decisive moment that separates the condemned girl between life and death, a huge stone flew like a missile far from the ground to the ground and hit him in the head like a bullet fell at him from close range. The executioner let go of the noose, fell to his knees, and grabbed his head. Blood flowed from his head like a red liquid. Another huge stone fell near the huge police inspector Sakina's feet. She raised her watermelon large head to look. She saw stones and bricks flying towards her as if the sky had started raining cats and dogs over her head. She's about to return the condemned to die prisoner Intisar to the police wagon before she is stoned to death with her. Before she could move her huge body, another large stone hit her in the face and blinded her eyes with a torrent of blood. She fell flat on the back like a camel that had been hit on her neck with an ox before slaughtering her. The huge policewoman started bleeding profusely through her vile mouth and screaming and snoring like a wounded elephant. The apostate Muslim girl who was supposed to be hanged to death within seconds saw blood pouring from the policewoman's mouth and face. Then Intisar knelt close to Sakina's huge body and tried to help her to her feet. At that time, a sharp stone buzzed over her head and missed her by a fraction of an inch. She heard the sound of the stone passing close to her right ear, and it went and hit the head of another large guard policewoman and also knocked her to the ground like an ox that was hit with an axe on its neck. Stones and bricks come flying like swarms of locusts and fell on the place where Intisar is standing like drops of heavy rain. The angry crowds have now turned it into uncontrollable hooligans. The stones and bricks are like a shower of rain that initially started with a few drops and turned into a torrential shower of flood. The shower soon turned into a torrent of stones. Again, the condemned to death girl Intisar put her hands around the huge body of the unconscious police elephant woman Sakina, Satan Allah, Abdi Iblis, and tried to lift her up. However, the huge body of the fallen woman prevented her from attempting to help her. At that time, a small stone hit her on one of her buttocks. The blue caused her sunburn. She placed her right hand on her left buttock and rubbed it. Then Intisar stood up, turned her back, and looked around. She witnessed a bloody fight started between police officers and angry Muslims. Angry believers tried to break through the security men's barrier and attack her. At the same time, the police men and soldiers beat and put them back. The hail of stones and bricks continued to fly and fall everywhere. Many security men and people were seriously injured. Some had already fallen to the ground and trampled under thousands of feet. The Muslim believers managed to break through the wall of the security barrier and started fighting with the policemen, army soldiers, and the rebel support forces of the Janjaweed. Police officers, army soldiers, and rebel support militias began firing live bullets at the crowds of angry people. Therefore, some were killed either by shooting, stoning with stones and bricks, stabbing with swords, spears, and knives, or beating them with sticks and hammers. Finally, the girl convicted of apostasy and adultery, who was sentenced to death by stoning and beheading with a double-edged sword, finally overcame the shock. She rose to her feet, turned her body around, and headed toward the police wagon. For the first time since her arrest at Khartoum International Airport, the Christian bride Intisar found herself free and unrestrained, hands and feet, with heavy handcuffs and shackles. Intisar thought it was the safest place for her to return to the iron police wagon. After taking a few steps, the police inspector Al Amin Abdul Qaffar Abdul Sattar stopped her from moving forward. He is the same despicable Sudanese police inspector who prevented her foreign flight to Canada at Khartoum International Airport and just stopped her from escaping from Sudan and placed her under infernal detention. Here he is, standing in front of her in Freedom Square and pointing his loaded gun at her head. He concluded that if he did not kill her, she might find some Christian infidels lurking among the thousands of Muslims who might help her escape her imminent execution. So his finger crept onto the trigger and was about to fire. At that critical moment of his helpless victim, a stone struck his left ear. He too fell to the ground like a bull hit by a rock on the head. As he collapsed, he braced his finger on the trigger and fired in the air. His easy target closed her eyes when she heard the sound of the shot near her. She saw the bullet hit her body. When she does not feel the pain and does not fall to the ground like the executioner who was supposed to hang her on the gallows and police guard Sakina, she decides to run quickly toward the police car and climb and hide there until one of the other three guards came and led her to her cell that looked like a grave. Before she could do so, she turned her face toward the security police officer of Khartoum International Airport, who was hit on the head and the left side of his face with a large rock and fell. She saw the vile and despicable, lustful police inspector Abdel Satan, the servant of Iblis, swimming in a blood of his swimming in a pool of his blood, as if he were a black camel hit on the head with a light hammer, while his mouth froze like a fearsome humanoid or a jungle beast. Chapter 89, Stoning the Adulterous Muslim Wife. At first, the innocent girl Intisar thought of trying to help the wounded police inspector Al-Amin Abdel Qaffar Abdel Sattar to stand on his feet as she did with the injured devil incarnate inspector Sakina Khalaf Fallah Abduddin, or a Satan worshipper. But then she ignored the evil cop and turned toward the police wagon. She understood that the wounded police inspector, he would either kill her or arrest her if he ever got back on his feet. So she left him swimming in a pool of blood and began to make her way between the police officers and army soldiers, and no one paid any attention to her because they were fighting a fierce battle against the crowd who wanted to reach her and stone her to death. She is still afraid that the despicable fallen police inspector might shoot her and kill her if she opened his eyes again. Therefore, Intisar let him fall near the body of the evil policewoman Sakina, demon Allah. Then she began to fight her way through the fighting slaves of Allah and the servants of the government. The first force is armed with white weapons and the other with fair arms. It was the Battle of Badr al-Kubra when the Mujahideen of the Prophet Muhammad fought against the pagans of Mecca. After taking a few steps, the combatants prevented her from going to the police car. She could now feel angry Muslim believers and law enforcement troops pushing her with force from all sides. No one recognized her and did not see her as a result of the thick dust cloud that buried everywhere. She saw people falling everywhere. These two forces are fighting each other like Satan, Lucifer, and his demons are fighting against the angels of God, headed by Archangel Michael. The raging battle forced her to change direction and started making her way in the opposite direction. She doesn't know where to go now. As she made her way through the police, soldiers, Janjaweed, and crowds, she fell several times, but each time managed back up, to get up on her feet. The frightened Intisar continued to fight her way through the mob, the police, and the army. In 15 minutes of running, she managed to reach a place where many people were fleeing for their safety. Intisar noticed that the majority of those fleeing the battle are women and children. She had seen some children, all women, and all folks fall to the ground, wounded, and many killed in the stampede. The kind-hearted girl in Tisar was deeply saddened to see such innocent children and all folks brutally murdered because of her. Some disabled wheelchairs have been pushed down on their owners are either dead or seriously injured. Some women with their infants were also crushed and their babies fell down. Only children who have lost their parents are running everywhere. Convicted girl in Chisar is now moving with the stream of escapees. Many people are screaming out of fear of death and in order to protect their lives. She could hear the constant sound of gunfire deafening her ears. She became very scared and terrified. At any moment, she expects a bullet to hit her body or a stone her head. Moreover, she knew that mobs of angry Muslims were throwing thousands of stones and bricks because they wanted to stone her to death. The loud screams of people also frightened her. Despite this, she continued to run under the bullets and hail of stones and bricks. After half an hour of running and suffering, Intisar managed to reach an empty spot. She saw many fleeing people like her now running in front of her. She decided to change direction and not run after those fleeing. She was afraid someone would recognize her and reveal her identity to the angry crowd. Then the escaped convicted girl jumped over the fencing of freedom ground and started running aimlessly until she reached a residential area. Intisar can still hear the frenzied riots and deadly fights between the two warring forces because of her still raging in the valley of the shadow of death. She continued to run faster than ever in her tragically dangerous life. She is running faster than the day she ran away from the mob who mistook her for a zombie girl and chased her from the cemetery to the gate of the military base. After running for a long distance, the apostate convict girl stopped to catch her prey. Then she knocked on three doors of seemingly luxurious houses, but no one opened the door for her. She took a few minutes rest, still standing, and then continued running. Intisar ran for about another hour with no purpose or aim. Finally, she became exhausted and realized she couldn't run anymore. Her tired and weak body could not move any further. She was like a mini rickshaw taxi that ran out of gas. But she realized that she had reached a big bridge. In the field of non-freedom, the sound of raging battles are now dead to her ears. It was like she came out of the valley of shadow of death. Then she sat down on the edge of the bridge to take a break and catch her breath. She doesn't know what to do or where to go next. She decided that no matter what might happen to her, she did not want to go back to her grave cell and those harsh police female guards and terrorist Muslim girls who are known as Sisters of Nusayba. She would rather choose to be stoned to death or die in the streets like a stray dog than return to the evil vigilantes and criminal Muslim terrorists. She wishes to be killed once rather than killed every day and buried alive in her that grave-like cell. Other apostate Muslim wife and adulterous Christian bride on death row, a prisoner's fugitive sits wondering what to do next. She witnesses a mini taxi pull towards her and cross the bridge. Then Intisar rose at once to her weary feet and waved her hand to the driver. The taxi overtook her and stopped a few meters in front of her. She quickly rushed out and opened the passenger door. When she looked inside, she saw an old man with a white beard. Then she told him while she was panting and her body was sweating, "Can you help me, uncle? I'm in a hurry. I have to take the bus that is going to it today to the city of Gadarif." Getting quick, the driver yielded. "This is not the place to stop." Intisar quickly entered her exhausted body and closed the door behind her. "I will be fine if the traffic police see me stopping to pick up a passenger in the middle of the bridge." Intisar did not respond to his complaint. She looked at him for a moment and then turned her frightened face and began to look outside. The old man thought she was in a hurry, so he went at a full speed. The speed continued to increase steadily. Short after, the taxi crossed the Freedom Square Bridge and headed towards Gadar City's bus station in the popular market Al Suga Shabi in Khartoum. The mind of the girl escaping from prison has not yet overcome the fear of death. She suspects that she is still living in the daily reality of her mother's land's hell. She shook her head several times to assure herself that she was not dreaming or hallucinating what she was going through. She is now supposed to be executed, dead, and gone forever. How could she escape from those huge female bodyguards, police officers, army soldiers, RSF, Janjaweed, and thousands of angry Muslims who gathered in the square of the execution field to kill her and rejoice in her death? She knows that many of them were killed in her place and many of them will die sooner or later. As the taxi was speeding toward the bus station, it passes several police cars and military trucks speeding in the opposite direction, all loaded with police officers and army soldiers armed to the teeth. The girl on the run from death now knows where those cars are headed. Where are the government vehicles are going? Has our beloved country Sudan been invaded by the enemy country Israel? The driver asked sarcastically. Intisar ignored his racial and religiously loaded, biased comment and pretended to be worried about her trip. Then she looked at her hand and saw a small watch still hanging around her wrist. In all those terrible and dark days, she never parted from her watch. It is the only gift her lover Sami bought for her. She would hide it inside her panties and bra, and sometimes in her mouth. She wished to swallow it in her stomach instead of allowing anyone to take it from her. It is rhythmic beating represents the beating of Sam's heart, who is always in love with her. The old cabby arrived at the bus station, stopped his taxi, and waited for the beautiful teenage passenger to pay her fare and ran towards the bus leaving for her home city, Gadarif. Instead, Intisar removed her small watch and dropped it into his hand. The girl escaping from prison and the death sentence said while crying, My good uncle, please accept this small watch as your fare. I lost all my money that was stolen with my bags when I arrived today by plane from Cairo City. I have no relatives in Khartoum City, so I must go back to my family in the city of Gadarif. Otherwise, I will have to roam the streets without shelter, money, and no free, safe place to sleep at night. The old man said when he saw her tears falling from her beautiful eyes onto her smooth cheeks, I only take my fares in cash. Since you said that you lost all your money that was looted with your bags, please save your precious little watch and go ahead and take your pass back to your family. Enjoy a safe journey. City. Gadarif, Saad. I was also born in that beautiful city, but my family moved half a century ago to this damn city, Khartoum, which is full of thieves, corrupt politicians, and dangerous police officers. My favorite song is sung by the late wonderful female artist عشة الفلاتية يا سمسم القضارف الزول صغير ما عارف. Yes, my daughter, you are a small girl indeed, and you did not know the evil of people in this city. So you trusted them until they deceived you and stole your bags and looted your money. Praise be to God that He saved you from them before they gang raped you and then kill you to hide their heinous crime. The said innocent girl Intisar, who was unjustly condemned to death, felt that the wise old man summed up her tragedy in simple terms, as if he had read her sad love story in a book. Thank you very much, my kind uncle. You are more loving and generous than my late father, Ibrahim. May God have mercy on his soul. Then Intisar took the old man's fragile hand and kissed it gently with her sweet, soft lips. The good old man wiped a few tears from his eyes and encouraged her to move quickly and travel to her final destination and should not miss her path. He even wished for God's protection and care for her. Then the convicted girl opened the taxi door and rushed toward the bus stop. She hastily crossed the street, knowing that the police were chasing her. A light truck was about to crash into her, but the driver slammed his foot on his brakes, honked his horn in a deafening sound, then pulled his head out and cursed her angrily. Fuck you, little Eritrean refugee bitch. The fleeing Sudanese girl ignored him and in a few steps crossed the wide road and reached the ticket office of the Gadari bus. Then Intisar saw passengers queuing. She looks at their faces and wonders if any one of them could agree to help her if she, with tears in her eyes, asked him to buy her a ticket. Somehow she resisted the idea of going to them and begging them to buy her a ticket. Her past bitter experiences on the streets of the capital city have taught her that no man will give money without the expectation of having sex with a beautiful young teenage girl like herself. She's afraid that someone will recognize her and inform the police of her whereabouts and get her rearrested. So she turned her face and went in the opposite direction. Intisar thought the only alternative for her was to find a place to hide. She even thought of returning to the good Samaritan Coptic Christians and asking them to hide her and help her escape from the Sudan to Egypt. She immediately rejected this idea when she remembered that no one of the Coptic family members had ever come to visit her in prison or write her a letter. Even her dear friend Suzanne did not visit her while she was suffering in the woman's prison. Intisar had already guessed correctly. They decided to distance themselves from her for fear of the police. Surely the Sudanese police would have arrested them and held them responsible for brainwashing her and converting her from Islam to Christianity. Any sane person in the place of her Coptic friend Suzanne and her Christian family would have done the same. The apostate Muslim girl convicted of death sentence who escaped from prison in Tisar also saw that her mother Sarah and her sister Farida had washed their hands and disowned her as well for the same reasons. Only her husband's friend Salah, as a recognized Sudanese lawyer, risked his life, reputation, and career and tried to exonerate her of her unpardonable crimes of forgery, deception, treason, apostasy, adultery, bigamy, and murder. Likewise, his wife, her dear friend Muna, dared to come to the Khartoum criminal court and shed hot tears when she saw her bound in chains. Nevertheless, the apostate Muslim girl in Tisar understood the justified fears of her Muslim family, friends, and the good Coptic Christians who had helped her in the past. They all wisely decided not visiting her in prison nor calling her on the phone or writing to her. Then the jail escapee remembered that her lover Sami had told her that his friend Salah had advised him to take his fugitive girlfriend Intisar, who was fleeing from the verdict of obedience, and flee to Egypt or South Sudan. But how could she dream of going on such a long trip without money or a passport? Before she can get out of her her country or Khartoum city, someone might recognize her and report her to the police. Accordingly, the girl escaping from prison again does not know what to do or where to go next. She asks herself, should she surrender herself to the police and allow them to hang her to death on some gallows inside the prison, or go to the Nile River and commit suicide again and kill herself instead of being executed by the police or angry Muslim brutally stoning her to death. While the Christian wife, convicted of apostasy and adultery, who escaped execution by sheer chance or by the ability of a divine person, was thinking about those inevit- inevitable difficult possibilities and choices, she suddenly saw a small shop that sells and repairs watches. She quickly walked over to the shopkeeper and offered her little watch for sale. It is the only valuable thing she can think of selling at such a critical time in her burial, burial, burialless life. The girl who was sentenced to death by hanging and stoning said, "Excuse me, kind sir, will you buy a used watch?" "Sorry, miss, I only sell and repair watches." "Would you please, good sir, keep my watch and lend me some money? I lost all my money because it was stolen with my bags, and I have to go back to my family and my city Gadaref today. I don't know anyone in this big city. I arrived today by plane from Egypt to Sudan. I have no relatives in Khartoum city. As soon as I reach my city and my family, I will send your loan to your store address. I don't lend money either. However, since you said you lost all your money which was stolen with your luggage, I will buy your used watch." Immediately, Intisar quickly removed her watch and handed it over to the shopkeeper. She's worried that he might change his mind. When she saw that his hand grabbed her beautiful watch and placed it under his table, the beloved Intisar felt as if she had sold the heart of her lover Sami and his love too to another man. It is the only gift her boyfriend has bought her since they fell in love. Moreover, it is her secret Christian wedding gift with her Christian husband. But in her difficult situation, she understood that she must sell one of her body parts if that might help her escape rearrest and execution by hanging or stoning. The watch shop owner, who unknowingly bought her heart, gave her less than half the real price of her precious and beautiful watch. She shed tears when she was deprived of her husband's only gift. She felt as if she had cheated on her Christian husband and slept with another Muslim man for a small price. Despite her feeling of guilt, Intisar grabbed the small amount of money, thanked the man who cheated her, and ran to the bus ticket office. When she got there, she found that all the passengers had bought their tickets and took their seats inside the Al Taysir bus. She learned from the person who sold her a ticket that it was the last bus heading to Gadaref city that day. Intisar bought her ticket with her own money and got on the bus through the back door. When she got inside, the last row of the seats were unoccupied. She inserted herself into the right corner and buried her head in her lap. Then she offered a prayer to her Lord for safety and security. Since she was arrested at Khartoum International Airport until that moment, the fleeing Christian bride did not remember God and did not ask Him to save her life. It was as if her terrifying and dark days inside the woman's cemetery in the prison had darkened her mind and erased from her memory any hope and any belief in a creator. After the short prayer, the third innocent girl Intisar began weeping silently for her lost hope and lost love. So far, she is moving without any travel plans or a purpose or a specific destination. She doesn't know why she is going to her hometown. She knows this is the first place the police authority will look for her. She cannot go back to her family's house. Gadarif police can easily find her hiding in her family's home. She cannot expect any of her four friends to shelter her. Even Salah Hamuna cannot help her hide from the police. She has no money to buy food or move to any other city. If anyone recognizes her, he will report her to the police authority. She felt that her country, the whole of Sudan, had become a big prison in which she was imprisoned. Therefore, she expected her freedom to be no more than a few hours. Sooner or later, she will be arrested and thrown into her dark grave, and then she will be hanged to death in Cobra Women's Prison. She knows that in that notorious prison, many famous Sudanese politicians and thinkers were executed, including the great Islamic religious thinker Mahmoud Muhammad Taha. Once again, the girl escaping from prison and death found that all the doors were closed in her face. As usual, every time she finds all the roads are closed in her life, she faces a dark fate and she faces a dark fate. She believed that the blood of her late innocent sister Firdaus brought her the evil that she is facing now. However, she trusted her luck and faith and continued praying and crying silently. Shortly after the start of the journey, the bus entered the highway and began to increase its speed at a steady pace as it headed east. The hours of her long journey passed slowly like 5 years. During those hours, Intisar did not raise her head or look around. The bus stopped several times for the passengers to either relieve themselves or eat their food. At every stop, her heart became filled with fear, dread, and panic. Whenever the bus stopped at the security checkpoint, she was afraid of being recognized and arrested by the highway police. Somehow she remained unidentified until near sunset at the time the Taysir bus finally arrived at her birthplace. Every traveler who saw her believed that she was an Eritrean refugee returning from the capital city. The girl escaping from the dungeon does not have an hour to know the time. She preferred not to ask anyone about the time for fear of being identified and reported to the police authority. What time means to her anyway? She is in no hurry to eat, meet someone, or go anywhere. She has no money to buy food, no relative or a friend to go to, and no specific place to go and hide. In